So I've got to start by asking a question. Many people here from Detroit, who are born, raised in Detroit? Nobody. In the 139 square miles. Good. Okay, I can tell you anything then. That is good. Well, welcome to Detroit. Welcome to this incredible facility that Karen has just introduced you to. The first thing you can tell is I'm not from Detroit. I'm an outsider. So I bring an outsider's perspective to this city that's been my home for 25 years. Anyone here play golf? You following what's happening? You shouldn't say that. Although I live in America, I am an American when it comes to golf, when it comes to sport. I'm afraid that Stars and Stripes don't work with me, and we're doing well in Paris. I got a lot to say, but I hope that you've got a lot to say as well. So I've got two presentations, but I probably won't get to the second one. One is this one, Learning from Detroit, which David has asked me to do. This is my second time through it. Made a few changes this time. I have another one which is very gritty, very detailed, and relates to studies that my own students did over the past 2 years. We actually repeated some work looking at what we call the maker community, and we can get into that if time permits. But David wanted me to set what you've been looking at into a broader context, maybe flying around that 10,000 feet, so that you've got a sense of the city. I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to give you history. I'm not an economist. I'm not going to give you sort of an economist's sort of dead hand view of what this is all about. I'm going to try and give you an overview that I hope you'll find interesting. There's too many controls here. And let's see if it works. If you want to interrupt, interrupt. Okay? You ask a question, ask a question. Don't. All right. How do we put this thing on? Okay. Michigan Central Depot. Iconic building, sat looming over the city. In fact, still does sit looming over the city. Did you go by it today? You didn't. But if you did, if you were driving around anywhere on the westish side, we can probably see it from one of these buildings if we look, it became a symbol of Detroit. It lay empty from 1984 when the last train went through it. This was where the trains came in into Detroit, coming over from or under from Canada and then making their way out to Chicago. Today we have a little station which is up there in Woodard we call Amshack. It really is a pretty depressing little place to get on and off a train as compared to this magnificent building that was at one time the main railway station coming into the city. Oops. Until this happened in June 17th, 2018. You can't read it, but under here is what we see on our slide. Ford's greatest vision for itself in Detroit. Decision was made by Ford Motor Corporation to buy this building, which we know today, or yesterday, what they paid for it. They paid $90 million for this gigantic building, plus a lot of other facilities around it. 90 mil.
Oh my goodness.
From the International Bridge Company. Now that's another lecture, another story about urban entrepreneurs that we maybe won't get into. The bridge to Canada, just as a factoid. The bridge to Canada, the busiest bridge leaving the United States of America because parts go over, they make cars, they bring the cars back, a lot of traffic, privately owned. Has been privately owned since the 1920s by a family, the one family, the Maroon family. And they owned not only the bridge and get all the tolls, but they also owned the railway station and everything else. Not the tunnel, but the railway station itself and lots of other land around it. And the problem of recreating that part of Detroit has been not just the fact that that building lay empty until Bill Ford decided to move part of his company in there, but they also controlled the bridge. And again, that's another story because we're about to build a new bridge. So we're seeing major, significant, important change happening in this city of Detroit. I think encapsulated by what Bill Ford would like to do. Detroit is America's great comeback story. This is amazing, completely artificial doctored picture of downtown Detroit. But, you know, again, it makes my point. Detroit is infused with art and abuzz with transformative change. Come experience the artist-led rebirth, and now you'll find a city full of passionate people, like the folks that own this place. And that is important. And I want to try and connect that passion and enthusiasm to where we are in Detroit today. However, I also want to take you to the reality of what the place is you're in today. Some of you said you came from suburban Detroit. Where did you come from, sir? Novi?
Bloomfield.
Bloomfield? Anyone else?
Heartland.
Pardon?
Heartland.
Okay, Heartland. So I want to set that context as well, because it's important. Because this is my argument. My argument is one of the problems that Detroit faced, and indeed still faces, is that it is a central city of a region that is fractured. It calls itself a region or a metropolitan space, but in reality, it's something quite different. A little bit of data, not too much to Saturday afternoon. After all, you know, you might rather be watching football than, sorry, David.
Not till 4:30.
Okay, 4:30. This is Detroit. Orange bars, Detroit, 1950 to 2010. The mauve purple bars are the suburbs. Only one other major city in the United States of America lost more people as a percentage of the population between 1950 and 2010. And that will be the quiz question that I'll get answers later on in the day. But as you can see, it was a description of precipitous decline. 1.8 million people, the city complete, as I have called it in many other places, to the latest census that we have, 2010, of just over 700,000. Incredible when you lose that number of people. People are what makes cities. So if you don't have people, you really don't have a city. You don't have a place. And we saw this incredible decline. Today we're looking at 675, maybe on a good day. You know, on a bad day, 650. We'll see when the census is held. But that's the other story. This amazing suburbanization. Now, Detroit was not alone. I mean, most cities in the United States of America decentralized, but the impact in Detroit was pernicious and affected businesses, people, institutions. It affected the economy, not just of the city, but of the region as a whole. And that's the context that pervades today. And the challenge in Detroit is to not just remake the city and the businesses that are in it, but to deal also with the region itself. Not the clearest of maps, but I think I do this to make my point. That's where you came from today. Just look at the size of the circles. That's Ann Arbor. This is Dearborn, Fordland, outside of the city of Detroit. And this is what we've called in various studies and other the growth crescent. This is South Macomb. This is basically military, large military production and training and all the rest of it. Tardec is the biggest company there. This brings us into Oakland County. I wonder if you could think what that would be in southern Oakland County. The biggest single circle outside of Dearborn is right there. Health. That is Beaumont. And all the connecting health industries around Beaumont. And then you come through to another health centre. So you're coming through this crescent down into Western Wayne and into Washtenaw County. That's the geography of jobs in the metropolitan space. A little bit of drill down just to give you a better sense of what it's like. So the Tri-County, Oakland, Wayne and Macomb that you were just looking at has over 2 million jobs in this labour market, as I'd like to call it. And there are the statistics for Macomb, Oakland and Wayne, and here's Detroit. 16.5% of the metropolitan jobs, or the Tri-County jobs, are within the city of Detroit. And this is a projection from 2010. It's probably not that, but it gives you, it makes the point. There aren't very many jobs in this central city. So it's loss of people that everybody talks about. Everybody talks, oh, Detroit lost its population. Detroit lost its jobs. And they sprawled. This is from a Free Press document. It was actually based on Brookings' study that was done a number of years ago. The darker the colour, the more jobs there are in the metropolitan space. Look how light it is here in the center of Detroit. This is a 3-mile core, this is a bigger area, and look at these jobs. 7.3% of the jobs in the metro area are in the city of Detroit, roughly. Average household income, $22,000. Average median household median income, $22,000. The minute you get out beyond the city, 3 times of the level of household income. So this is telling us a lot of things. Not only did Detroit lose jobs, not only did Detroit lose people, but it also lost household income. Driving down again, let's have a look at what we have got. And who is here in the city of Detroit? Slightly old, 2017, based upon even older data, so not too sure. But look at number 1, Rock Ventures. That's the holding company that Quicken have for all the different businesses under that group. 15,000, it's more like 17 today. Medicine, important. DMC, Henry Ford, City of Detroit, public sector jobs make up the next biggest one. General Motors has 7,000 jobs in the central city, but look at the number of jobs it has in the Tri-County. I'm driving this home all the time. Then we come to government, Detroit Public Schools, FCA, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, just about 6,000, and the reason for that is largely actual making of cars, of which there's a big plant, but 26,000 in the Tri-County, excluding Detroit. And then look at Ford. 46,000 jobs in Dearborn, and about 1,500.
That's going to change in the next 4 years, isn't it?
Look at the screen.
Yeah.
No. This is a problem. It's difficult, but it's truthful. That is not a game changer. That is not a game changer. Look at it. Look at that. Yes, it's great that Ford are coming in. Yeah, it's great the depot is going to get redeveloped. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. It is exciting, and I'm all in favour and what's going to happen around that crunchy area in Corktown. Come down when you've got a chance. There's some great restaurants. I was there on Tuesday night to a place called Lady of the House.
Oh, yeah.
Fully booked. I had to book it 4 weeks in advance to get a table for 4. You walk in, and it's all these 30 to 32-year-old guys in Tom Ford suits, check shirts, not a tie to be seen, and they're all sitting around there, and you know that they've come out of a finance office somewhere because, you know, someone else is picking up the tab. Not cheap.
Can I tell you to get a quick story?
Quick story.
I was there in February. I had to wait an hour to get a few asparagus spears. I was not happy. They ran out of the meat dishes and everything, you know.
I won't start trading stories. So the menu comes, and it's very nice if you're a foodie. The bottom menu was chicken, right? You buy a chicken, $69. $69 for a chicken, and I'm going, I want to know their parents, you know, of the chicken. Anyway, I digress. So my point is that yes, we're seeing these big changes coming, but don't put too much weight on the silver bullet model, because even Bill Ford and bringing the new automotive center into this iconic building, changing Corktown, is actually not going to change the jobs even more. And more importantly, perhaps more importantly and more seriously, when these 2,400 jobs come into the place, how many will be from Detroit? How many will be taken by people living in Detroit? How many of these jobs will be filled by people who went to high school in Detroit? Not very many, I would hasten to add. So we've got to think long and hard about what this is about. So how does this compare? Just a little bit of comparison. Let's have a look at jobs relative to population against some of our competitors in the Midwest.
Sorry.
That's all right. So let's take the New South. Let's take the growing center of the New South. Look at Atlanta. There is a population of about 500,000 in the city of Atlanta, but it has over 800,000 jobs. 183% of population in terms of jobs. Let's take something a bit closer to home. Cleveland. Population around 500,000, population of 400,000, jobs close to 500,000. So again, it is job positive, job rich. a harder city, a city that is often seen as struggling, you look at Philadelphia. Yes, it has a population 1.5 million, but with 700,000 jobs, it's not bad. It's still up there. Detroit is struggling. It's struggling to be in this position. And the headline I've used there is Detroit is job poor. And just in case you forget it, Detroit is job poor. It is the most, in my opinion, the most important issue in this market-based economy. This is, the business of America is, thank you, carbon coolage. And it's true. You can't just come in and suggest that the city is going to do something or be something if it's not being part of the American market. If it's not in business, then it's not going to operate. The problem is that we now have what in our business we call an incredible, devastating legacy to overcome. And as we move forward, as you'll see in the next few minutes, we've got that legacy on our backs. And how do we overcome it? Poverty. One of the poorest cities in the United States of America. And you know why? I showed you why. Because not only did the people move, not only did the jobs move, but the incomes moved as well. So we're now looking at the darker blues. This is the area you were at today, right there in Fitzgerald, one of the poorest areas. But look at the poverty in the lower east side, as we call it, or down here in the southwest, or further out into some of the areas on the west side that are really, really concentrated poverty. That's the term that is used by the feds and others, and that's what we have in spades, in buckets. We're also racially divided, and that cannot be minimized or talked about. The racial division is a suburban, it is a metropolitan, it is a regional division, which is very clear from this dot map. Looking at the city of Detroit, which is overwhelmingly African American, although with an increasing and important Hispanic minority in southwest Detroit. But when you look at the suburbs, you can see that we are a divided region.
What's the pocket? Is that Hamtramck?
This is Highland Park, and that is Hamtramck.
Yeah.
And Hamtramck is a very mixed area. You're going to go there, you're going to get the sense of how immigration has become very important. We've got immigration here and immigration there. By the way, this is the interesting area around Dearborn and other areas that has also seen immigration from the Middle East. But overwhelmingly, our picture is that of an urban black population and a suburban white population. There's the jobs. It's another way of looking at it. These are private sector jobs by density. So where are the densest concentration of jobs? And you obviously know where I'm going with this story very quickly, because the jobs are here. They're in Oakland County. They're up here in that defense corridor in Macomb. There they are in Dearborn. We don't go out to Washtenaw in this particular map. So what I'd put together was these 3 or 4 bits of information that I think are worth talking about. Because the jobs are there. We just saw them. They're out there. The question is, how do you get there? And if you're poor, as you are in Detroit, a significant population is suffering, and you don't have access to a car, you can't afford a car, you need some form of ability, some physical mechanism to get you out to the jobs. And unfortunately, and this is far too detailed and takes longer to discuss it, we don't have a convenient, effective, affordable way of moving people out into that broader labour market. I will make my political point. This bottom chart is a statement about different metropolitan areas and how much they spend per capita on public transportation. Many of you, I'm sure, have used public transportation in a place like Seattle or Denver or Minneapolis, St. Paul. So if you're in Seattle, they are spending about $400 per annum on transit spending, investing in local transportation to move people around that region. Now, what company is it who's in Seattle again?
Amazon, Microsoft.
Maybe it's Amazon, yeah. Anybody here followed the HQ2 story? headquarters to? Well, Google it and have a look, and look at what they demanded of their new location for their second headquarters, a decision they have not yet made. They don't need to make a decision. They probably made the decision themselves, but they've done a lot of work in the time being. Because in Seattle, they have a public transport system, not perfect, but it gets people around who don't have a car. In southeast Michigan, with a population of 4 million, a million more than Seattle, transit spending is based upon $67 per annum per person. $67. You can't buy a lot for $67. Many people here have been on M1 or the Q line. 3 people. Wow. Okay, so our approach to public transportation is, done on the back of an envelope. Somebody came together and said, let's build a little streetcar, and it goes from downtown here up to the new centre where I work and used to work, and takes you back down 3.5 miles up, 3.5 miles back. Cost about $190 million, which in transportation terms is nothing. It is chicken feed. And that's our latest investment in public transportation.
Don't forget the people mover.
I'm sorry. But this is my critical point. And this is what we have today. This is what we've got in our area. A region that is clearly separated by our ability to live. The quality of life is measured. I could use any statistic in there, which educational quality, educational attainment, whether it's longevity, whether it's all sorts of health characteristics as well, would be mapped in a similar way to this. In other words, this central city has suffered because of the loss of what I've talked about. Loss of people, loss of businesses, and in particular loss of jobs. Moving forward, 2014. What were the options in 2014? For those of you who are not from here, or weren't looking at newspapers, or you were living under a stone at that time, sorry, but it was a big deal for us. Detroit went bankrupt. Detroit was the largest bankruptcy of any municipality by far. And the state took it over. The state then brought in an emergency manager who came in and attempted to remake the city, which he did. He did it in less than a year. It was amazing what this gentleman did. One option was, Detroit bankrupt, please go home at the next exit. Or, as you say, last person out, flick the switch off. Detroit's finished. Detroit's gone. That was not the choice. The choice was to start and re-engineer the debt in such a way that the city could start afresh, could draw a line. And it was a very controversial story, which I could spend hours talking to you about. I've got many presentations on there about bankruptcy, but I think we've got to try and talk about something else. So we didn't switch the lights out. What we did was attempt to restructure government, and I can talk about it if you want, but I wanted to focus on some of the big items. One was central city renewal, start from the centre and build out. And then we had a number of initiatives that were in the works, that were beginning to happen. One of them was LCA, or Little Caesars Arena, which opened almost exactly a year ago, and is now a venue for the Red Wings and for all sorts of other things, rock music, performance. The Pistons have decided to move down there. Even the university where I work has moved its business school onto a site just about here that was paid for by Mike Illich before he passed away. So central city renewal has been important. Another strategy was a little bit up the street. LCA is down about here, and this is you coming north on Woodward Avenue, and there are big institutions, big important institutions today, where the service economy leads with all the might that it has. One medical centre, a second medical centre, and a public university in Wayne State with all its power of its spending, ownership, jobs, and the like. About 26,000 employees, enormous amount of real estate, operating budgets in the billions. You get the point. Here's an engine for economic change. Can businesses connect to it? Can Midtown get moving to connect to these sets of anchors? They're not going anywhere. They're not moving down the street. They're going to stay. So the anchor strategy became well known in urban economic development terms, from Buffalo, done well, to Detroit, trying to do well to other places. So that anchor strategy has been important. Thirdly, often talked about, in my opinion, and this is me, Robin Boyle speaking, wrongly interpreted for reasons that I'll explain in a minute. Well, why don't we turn this into farms? Many people hear of urban farming in Detroit. Honestly, put your hands up if you've heard of that. Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, a lot more people have heard about urban farming than almost anything else. And it looks okay. That's taken from one of these, what do you call them? Drones flying over. So let me point out that each of these lots, all the way down the street, would have had a house on them. The houses have gone for a variety of reasons. Where they've gone is often into the ground. Some have been physically removed, but many just settle into the basements, and nature begins to take its course. Here's another view, actually pretty attractive. You're looking from the west downtown. This is the Motor City Casino, one of 3 that we have in the city. This was Tiger Stadium, which has all been redone, about to be redeveloped. And this is North Corktown, as we call it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. What do you suppose is going to happen in the next 4 to 10 years with the redevelopment of it?
Well, there's a lot happening down here. There is a ton happening in this area. I mean, we could spend the next 3 hours just walking around Corktown, showing you what is happening because of this change. What would, seriously, to answer your question, in 4 to 5 years? Not a lot. Not a lot. The market moves very slowly. The market is not clearing. The value of the properties in here is probably between, even in North Corktown, maybe $40,000 if you're lucky. 50 maybe at the best corners. So very little strength, very little actual cash available in these sites. So they'll sit there for a long time. But that's the reality, and I can assure you that is the reality from mid-November to April. Now, would you bring up your kid there? Would anybody here want to live there? Nobody. So we've got a fundamental problem that is unlikely, in my opinion, to be addressed by finding some sort of back to nature model, or even a farming model, which actually doesn't exist in Detroit as yet. But we can certainly go into conversation about that in the next few minutes. So I don't want to be called Dorothy Downer, which I have often been called. There is change, and a lot of it's extremely positive. So our progress is happening. We need to be careful about that progress, but it's clearly here. So we've seen downtown property values was, and actually is still pretty sketchy, but it works. And they put $5 million into a brewery and restaurant on Charlotte in the Midtown area, and a little bit of public-private investment for something like the Q line, but iconic, a bit like the railway station. Let's change that. So here's this amazing story that has evolving between the sort of the McCoys and what was the other name? Hatfields and McCoys. Not quite. They don't fight, they get on. So Chris Illich and Dan Gilbert owning properties, redeveloping them, doing it together, and actually becoming a very important set of players in how the city is evolving and how things are changing where we are. So where are we going? Are we going to come out of this? Are we going to emerge into sunshine going to be there? Are we going to change this place? Well, you've seen a bit of it. You were there today. This is the city of Detroit. This is 139 square miles. This is 8 Mile, famously bounding onto Oakland. This is the Dearborn, Fordland, down in the downriver areas, as we call it. This is the Tony Grosse Points, the affluent white neighborhood in the Far East Side. And the strategy today, the public strategy today, is this idea of small-scale, granular investments in areas such as L6, which you are at today. This is Livernois McNichols. The anchor is the University of Detroit Mercy, which sits on that corner. There's also their school, of course. There's a very important Roman Catholic church. And this used to be a retail corridor that was important in Detroit. So there's a lot of things operating there. Can we just get a bit of momentum? And the foundation community, you've heard about Kresge and others, are putting significant amounts of money. Did you see the park as you walked through Fitzgerald this morning?
Yeah.
Okay, that was funded by the Kresge Foundation as a way of stimulating the neighbourhood. And there's lots of plans, both to do with property but also land use, to turn around the Fitzgerald neighbourhood, which is right there on that side of what we call L6, Livernois and 6 Mile. There's a similar one here in the southwest. There's a number over on this side. And this area here, the villages, is a sort of exemplar. It's the model that is being developed, particularly in West Village. Now, apparently you didn't meet David this morning, unfortunately, because he is a developer of a particular building. I'll run right to it now. It doesn't look much, but I can tell you, when you turn the corner onto Co in West Village, and you see that in the neighbourhood, built by an African-American developer, with people coming in and buying these properties, you think to yourself, yeah, this might actually work. So, Invest Detroit, which is part of this deep ecology of organizations, public and private, trying to help our urban development happen, initially identified 3 of these areas. The first one you were at was there, Southwest Detroit, which is the Hispanic area, and then West Village, as I've just talked about. And here you can see on this map that they're quite far away from that growth center of downtown, midtown, and the North End, which is sitting in this area here. So the idea is to find little pockets of value where the properties have held their value, where there are initiatives that could be brought together. There may not be retail today, but maybe that can come in. But are there opportunities for people to live there, and maybe we'll get going and we'll start to get some schools up and running. I haven't mentioned schools. I've stayed off that third rail of conversation in Detroit. Schools are really the third rail. Very difficult to have a conversation. And now they're going to extend it. They've now got 6 of these initiatives happening in the city of Detroit. But I know it's modest. It doesn't look much. Gosh, you build one of these in Ann Arbor every week. But for Detroit, it is iconic. But I want you to not leave here without an understanding that whatever is done here in Detroit, whether you're part of it, whether you move on, or whoever is challenged to think of where Detroit goes in the future, we've got to remember we've got that deep industrial legacy. There's the word. This is the infamous Packard plant. None of you here ever owned a Packard. David didn't even own a Packard. But his father might have. Maybe. Your grandfathers might have, because they were incredible cars. This plant closed in 1956. 1956. And it still looks like that today. That's pretty damning, that we've not even had the sense to clear a building like this and see what might happen. Of course, this remains, and the neighborhood is like that. It's hollowed out. There's not a great deal.
That's just north of Eastern Market, right?
North and east of Eastern Market, slightly over to the other side. We've still got enormous amounts of vacant land. Each black dot represents a vacant space which does not have a building on it, a structure. So one of the most depleted areas is what we call the airport area. Over here you can see the amount of black dots. This is particularly vacant area way out in the west side. I mean, when you get there, you think you should be in Chicago because you've taken so long to get there, but it really is devastated. And then, perhaps worst of all, is the Lower East Side, as we call it in here. This is a freeway running up North 94 to Chicago, and this is devastated and hasn't changed much at all. And that's my answer to you. There's so much land, there's so much space, that you can say one area looks as though it will move. It's going to take a while to do it. So there are 24 square miles of land that is vacant in the city of Detroit. That's bigger than most cities. And that's the dead weight of the legacy city that the city has to think about and deal with as it develops. Blight, I don't need to define blight, you know it when you see it. Blight is blight. It's an abandoned building, it's trash, it's tires, it's litter, it's everything that's horrible about it. And you can see the scale of blight. Every dot here, whether it's orange or red, is a blighted property. Students in my class often say, well, wow, things must be improving here.
There's just nothing there.
The point is there's nothing there. This man gets it. This man gets it. There's nothing there. This is the area with all the vacancy that I just showed you a minute ago. So we've got vacancy, but we've also got the problem of blight. 78,000 properties for removal or for further analysis. Moving one is difficult. Who owns it? Where's the title? No, my grandmother has it. She lives in Florida. She wants to hold on to it because she thinks it's going to make money. So she pays some taxes. No, nobody pays taxes. The state took over the title and then reverted the title to the land bank. So we've got mechanisms to try and deal with this. But they've got 78,000 of these to deal with. It is not lightweight work. It is very difficult. That's blight. You know what it's like. The future of Detroit is about people. It's not really about what I've been talking about. It's about people. And so we have to deal with children and their education. Whether you're white, black, or polka dot, it doesn't make any difference. If you are going to have children and you want them to be brought up in a neighborhood that's got half-decent schools, Detroit at present doesn't give you a good choice. There are private schools, there are charter schools, some good, some bad. There are religious schools, and some of them would be good. You could ship them all over the city, back and forward. We're still at a very early stage in trying to restructure what used to be a great public education system. We're nowhere near there. But perhaps the biggest challenge that we face is what you see in front of you. Now imagine this whole screen, this whole white screen is Detroit, which it is, basically. That's the area that we've been talking about. That's where you're sitting today. That's what's happening. The red line is, of course, the Q line, to give you a sense of scale. And that's downtown and midtown and the waterfront. That I've not really talked about. Maybe I should have. It's wonderful. But it's the rest of the city. It's the rest of the city that we need to think about. And last, some opportunities. Obviously, downtown is vital. Without a downtown, a city doesn't really work. So we need to continue building on downtown. There's no doubt about it. This is where it really started with Karmanos, who was an entrepreneur who did software development in the past. And he really, along with Dennis Archer, back in the 1990s, said, I want to come downtown. And he built that long before Dan Gilbert actually woke up and realized that he could do something in the city. Location, logistics, the businesses you're all going to be working in American, Michigan, and the US government will develop all the handling around here, but that bridge will be owned by Canada and they will get the toll income that it comes from. But the opportunity for taking Detroit at scale into this new world of logistics and all that means, I think is important for the city and for Southwest Detroit in particular, and maybe even for the region as a whole. Talent. It's important that we bring talent into the city. It's important that we hold the talent in a place and we provide the services, the quality of life that talented people want. We want to particularly retain the Detroit talent that's here. We lose a lot of the most talented Detroiters. And by that I mean black Detroiters. We lose them. They get poached off by colleges or they go away and they go to either the historic black colleges or even the big scale schools and they don't come back. We've got to get them to come back and be part of tomorrow in Detroit. And at the end of the day, perhaps we do go back to the history, which I said I was not a historian, but the reason for being Detroit here is on the straits, Detroit. And that was what made this city to be built on this river with Canada to the south. And perhaps the future of Detroit will indeed look more to the city It will look more to the river for a way of life, for its environment, for recreation, and for locating businesses and lifestyles. A smaller city, by sure, will never reach 1.8 million, with a strong downtown and a clustering of new facilities around this area. Talent's important. Logistics and businesses and infrastructure are critical, but we should also not forget our environment, which was based upon the river. So with that, I'll stop. I'll invite any questions or comments that you want. David can take me apart now.
No. So we have to actually run downstairs in about 3 minutes.
Oh.
But because we have to be over in
I know.
Hamtramck, you're welcome to come with us if you like.
I gotta go and do other things, but
So what we'll do is while I am packing up, they can ask whatever questions they have, and then we can, all in an orderly fashion, head downstairs. But Robin, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I put your bio on the Canvas site so they could all see. And yes, you can see a lot more there.
if you want follow up, write me anytime. I will reply. I've been in this business all my life, and if you don't reply to students, you don't have students. It really isn't as simple as that. If you don't communicate with students, then they will go away. So if you communicate to me, I will communicate back. Any questions? Any